Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video in the Python series. In this video, I'll be teaching about functions in Python. Alright, so let's get started here with functions in Python. So with functions, this is where stuff actually starts to get a little bit advanced. This is where we get to start really coding on a greater level than we've been doing up to this point, okay? So up to this point, we learned about the basics like variables and control flow. Now we move on to functions and modules and object-oriented programming and stuff like that. So it's going to be really exciting from this point on, in my opinion. So what is a function, okay? A function is really simple. It's a named group of code. So right here you have the result of two numbers, two variables being added together, being stored into a variable called result, okay? And now what we can do is go ahead and do print. We can say like 5 plus 6 is, and then result. So that will just simply print to the console, 5 plus 6 is 11. There we go. Pretty simple, very, very basic. But let's say that we want to do this again, right? Let's say that we want to rerun this code with different numbers or something like that. That means that every single time that we want to run this code, we have to rewrite it. So at this point, it's just kind of dumb to, copy and paste the same code over and over, right? So with functions, there's a way for you to contain this into one name called a function, and then wherever you call that name, the function, it will run that code, okay? So that's the big advantage of functions in Python and many other programming languages. So to make this into a function, all we have to do is to define, so def for define, and then now we need to give our function a name. So we're going to call it add. It's going to be called add, and then now we can put two parentheses here, and then we're going to put a colon, and then we're going to press enter. So inside of here, this is where we put the code that the function contains. So in this case, we'll just take this and put it right here. So now every time we call add, this means it's going to run this piece of code here, okay? So how do we call a function? So to call a function, all we have to do is do add. And there we go. So now we are calling the add function, and it should do whatever is inside of here. So if we run this, it should do the same thing that we had before. 5 plus 6 is 11. There we go. So we just created our first function and ran it. Now this is a very basic example, just adding two numbers, and it's actually still hard coding the numbers, but in the next episode I'll show you how to pass in numbers so that it can add pretty much any two numbers, right, and print the result, okay? So don't worry about that, but this is just a basic example of how to create a function and then how to call the function, because believe it or not, you've actually been using functions this entire time. So anytime you call print, that's actually a function call. It's a built-in function in the Python language. You just create your own custom function, but Python has its own functions, like the print functions. So you could say, I like potatoes, and now you are calling the print function and passing in I like potatoes, okay? And that will do its magic, I like potatoes, there we go. And there's a bunch of other ones that we've used so far, like for example, range. So range is a built-in function, that's why it says built-ins right here. So range, if you do control Q, it tells you what it's about, how to use it essentially. Return an object that produces a sequence of integers, start to stop, blah, 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 right? There you go. It's a built-in function that you can use within Python, but now we're defining our own functions so that we can have code that we can reuse. So again, what are the two main benefits of using functions in Python, right? So the first one is the one that I already mentioned, is code reuse. The code does not have to be completely rewritten every single time you want to use the code. So in this case, if we have a much more complex piece of code like calculating your tax returns or just anything that would take, let's say between 1 to 50 lines of code. Let's say that you want to do that multiple times. That means you have to write 50 lines of code over and over every time you want to run that code. Obviously, that gets it just fills up a lot of space, and it's not a very intelligent way of doing things. Another component, another benefit of using functions within Python is modularity. It's a weird word, but essentially it's the idea of breaking stuff up in your program into different modules or different sections, okay? So breaking it up into different sections. So if you break up your code that adds two numbers into a add function, now you know where to find the logic for adding two numbers. So let's say that you need to change that logic, you know exactly where to go, to the add function, right? So as another example, let's say that you are a software engineer and you're working for a company like Boeing and you're working on the software for the airplane, right? Let's say that they task you with changing something in the autopilot software. Let's say that they want to make it so that you can only fly a certain height, right? Then what you would do is you would go into that software, find where the autopilot part of the code is, then go deeper, find where the the height part of the code is, the part that monitors your altitude, right? It's all a breakdown of different parts of code, okay? So if you know where to find something, you know what function to find something in, the more easy it is to work with things. So to summarize, if you break down your code into functions that have specific meanings, like adding, subtracting, calculating stuff, doing some specific task, then in the future, it's more organized, you know where to find things, and you know how to change things, and it makes it way, way easier to organize your code, okay? So hopefully that makes sense, and that's why we use functions within programming languages, okay? Now in a previous video, we made a piece of code that calculates the factorial for a number, and if you have not seen that video, I believe it was 2 videos ago, a factorial of a number is essentially, let's say you have the number 5, right? To calculate the factorial of the number 5, it would simply be 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. So you're multiplying every number before 5, including 5 itself, okay? And that's the factorial of 5. Pretty simple, right? So let me rewrite the code that we made last time, and then we're going to see how we can improve it by making it into its own function, right? So let's say we want to calculate the factorial for number 5. So number is equal to 5, and then the resulting factorial will be stored in this variable. So factorial is equal to 1 by default. And then now to calculate the factorial, we're just going to need a loop. So for I in a range, so range is a built-in function, as we know, that can give you a range of numbers. So we'll say so the range of numbers we want, for example, in this case is 5, right? So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll start at 1, and then we'll do num plus 1. So this will give us 1 through 5, okay? You have to do plus 1, as we saw before, because it gives it up to that point, but not including that number. And then we're going to do colon, and then inside of this, we're simply going to do factorial is equal to factorial times I. There we go. And so now after that, we can do print factorial of num is, and we can say factorial. There we go. So now this will calculate the factorial of whatever number you provide in this variable. And let's go ahead and run this to make sure that still works. So factorial of 5 is 120. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 120. That should be good. We can do something like 500 if you want to. That will give us that massive number, which is insane that it can calculate that, but it can. So this is a pretty beautiful piece of code, as you see, right? So now every time we want to calculate the factorial of a number, we have to essentially copy this and paste it. The same problem as we saw before, right? It's especially, this is especially a big problem when you have a large piece of code, like 50 lines long, right? So what we want to do is take it, I'm just going to get rid of all this, is just take this piece of code and make it into its own function so that every time we want to calculate the factorial of a number, we just call the function. So define factorial, and then put the colon, and then inside of here, we paste the code that we want to run inside of the function. So in this case, we have a little bit of an issue. We see that the function is named factorial, but we already have a variable within that function called factorial. So there's a bit of a conflict, so you want to make sure that your variables are not the same name as your functions, generally speaking. And I think it actually still runs, so if you just call factorial, it should still work. It does, but it doesn't want you to do that usually. So what you want to do is try and give it a different name, even if it still works. So we're just going to rename the function itself to calculate factorial. And so now when we call the function, we'll run calculate factorial, just call this right here, and now it'll run the code in the function. So if we change this back to 5, it still gives us 120. Perfect. So now every time we want to calculate the factorial for 5, we can call the function by just putting this statement here. So calculate factorial, which is the function name. Boom. Now here we go. So every time we call this function, it's going to run the piece of code and output the factorial of 5. Pretty simple, right? And again, this is pretty basic. The number that we're calculating the factorial for is hard-coded, so that would be 5 in this case. In the next episode, I'll show you I can pass in a number dynamically so that we can calculate the factorial for any number, okay? So in this case, right now, if you want to calculate the factorial for a different number, we would kind of have to just define a different function for that. So that's not very smart though, so that's why we're going to check that out next episode. So the final example I want to give you here is just a really basic example, a function that will print your name. So define, and then the function name, and then the parentheses, and then the colon, and then the body of the function, which is the code, okay? So the code is so this will be run every single time you call the print name function. Really simple, right? So if we call print name, it should print out my name in a cool little block thingy. So if we can do this a bunch of times, and there we go. And now let's say that we want to change this name to a different name, so Cody to Billy Bob. Now we only have to change it in one place inside of our function, and now all these function calls here will all be changed at the same time because they're all, bringing the code from the same source, which is this function definition here. So call, or run rather, and then we get Billy Bob. Awesome. Okay, there you go. That's how you can create basic functions within the Python language. It's very, very easy, as you can see. And now we know how to create pieces of code that can be reused anywhere in our program, okay? So in the next episode, I'll be showing you function parameters, and then after that, I'll be showing you how to return stuff from functions. So stay tuned. It's going to get very, very cool very quickly. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers, so you can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.